So good to see you again. Welcome to another edition of the Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with Elena Rodriguez and Janet Morana, for our show, The Catholic View, where we give you news and views from a truly Catholic perspective. Our last episode, we talked about Into the Hands of God, the story of a wonderful pro-life activist who, because of the pain from her own abortion, turned her life over to God and is making huge strides in helping women in need in all kinds of situations. And ladies, this is a similar story, different but similar in the sense that another challenge, another struggle, and a difficult journey, and hoping to share these stories with you to encourage you that nothing is impossible with God. No matter where you're at in your life, no matter what you're struggling with, Jesus Christ will reach out to you and make all the difference. And this one, extremely incredible. This woman converted from Islam to not only Christianity, but to Catholic Christianity.
Yeah, and it was a journey.
Right.
And you know, I think we can all relate to this, especially you and I, Teresa, that were away from the church for so many years. We were on a journey. I mean, we basically, when I was younger, I rejected the church's teachings. I really did. I stood up and said, not for me. You know, I'm done. You know, I don't believe in all this anymore. And it took me almost 20 years.
Me too. Same thing.
Of being in the darkness, so to speak, not going to church, thumbing my nose at God. I mean, I was a cradle Catholic and I did this. And then, you know, it was through the prayers of my mother-in-law, which we've talked about on the show before. She did novenas
Your
for me.
own version of St. Monica, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, connecting with Father Pavone, who was assigned to my parish. That was his first assignment. And he helped bring me back. He became my spiritual director. And so many people might be watching right now and said, well, how does a person get from Islam to Catholicism? Well, let's start with, this all could help inspire those who know people who are away from the faith.
Right. And this is such a big journey. I mean, for us, we had to work through a lot of things. I mean, teachings and whatnot and coming back. And it was based really on our own misery and how unhappy we were being away from the church. And we finally had to admit that. But I think, Elena and Janet, it's even a bigger deal for someone who's coming from something like Islam, which is so far away from Christianity completely.
In many ways, it is diametrically opposed. And so if you have everyone around you in a certain mindset, and you all of a sudden break away from that, there's that social interaction that you miss. There's also that kind of social punishment. Right. Where people will give you the cold shoulder, so to speak, where your own family will think that you have betrayed them. So it's a struggle in two senses. One is trying to understand and trying to look and open your heart, your mind, your soul to God, and the other one is all the consequences that you're going to suffer. Right. So it is a huge step. We are all in that faith journey in one way or another, but this is quite remarkable.
It's remarkable, and I think also in terms of not just in case of Islam, her family rejecting her when she converted to Christianity, but you think about the way the world views Christianity, especially Catholic Christianity right now. So it's not just a double whammy. In some ways, it's a triple whammy for anyone who's moving from a faith that is so different and so far away from Christianity into Catholic Christianity, which is still the most rock solid, and despite all of our many problems with people in the church and some of the things that have happened in the last year or so, it's still, in terms of truth and orthodoxy, in terms of family, in terms of marriage, in terms of life, it is the most, how do you want to say, orthodox and strict. And so for them to come into a faith, be shunned by their family, and then also really be shunned by the world because the world doesn't agree with us, because we're always like salmon swimming upstream, that's quite a leap of faith, literally.
It is a leap of faith. One of the things I also lessons I draw from this example is that there's this, in academia especially, there's this myth that the Catholic Church does not want you to think, and it was through thought that
Isn't that crazy? It's just the opposite.
It's exactly the opposite.
Right. Faith and reason, as John Paul II says.
That's a myth we have to dispel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, recently, I was at the Catholic Marketing Network. It's a major conference. EWTN is always there, and I always see Doug there, and they're doing interviews for book marketing.
Doug Keck, our wonderful president and chief operating officer.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to speak with Derya Little, and she has a new book out that's I will highlight. It's called From Islam to Christ, Ignatius Press, and available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. But I had an opportunity to sit down and chat with her a little bit, ask her a few questions, and so let's take a look at what Derya had to say about her journey.
Growing up in Turkey was much more different than growing up in the US in many sense. But in other ways, we played outside with friends, and we played with balls in the creek. But then come summer, we all went to the mosque and learned our Muslim prayers. And in our household, we still practice the Muslim faith, but Turkey isn't as Muslim as Iran or Saudi Arabia. I say we were Muslim light, but still Islam was a big part of our lives. For a Muslim woman, I'd say Turkey is a better place to live, but still I feel like a Turkish woman is stuck between East and the West, because Islam is still so dominant that women are considered second class culturally, even though we are equal to men legally. So for instance, my mother had to work 40 hours a week, and then she had to come home and do all the things a woman has to do. Cook 3 courses of meal, wash the dishes, and wash the laundry by hand. So definitely they were stuck between an Eastern and a Western culture, which made the life actually not easier but harder. I was very faithful growing up. I learned how to read the Quran in Arabic, and I believed everything. I memorized the prayers. But when my parents divorced, that was the first time I ever questioned the faith they taught me, because they had lied to me about their love, and then that made me question everything else they taught me. And that's when I started questioning. And that's one thing you cannot do in Islam, because once you break that wall of fear of questioning Allah, then everything comes crumbling down. Once I rejected Islam, I didn't turn to anything else, because in Islam we are taught that all the Judaism and Christianity are the same. It's just that Jews and Christians corrupted Allah's teaching. So as far as I was concerned, they were all the same religion. They all taught the same thing. So I became an atheist, and I lived as an atheist until I met a Protestant missionary in Turkey. And I felt so sorry for her, because she still believed in these fairy tales, and I decided to convert her. I decided to show her the truth about the universe, that there is no God. And it took over 3 years for me to accept the possibility that God might exist. And then after a while, I realized that if God exists, then that's a big if. And a little intervention from the Holy Spirit, and I was baptized into the Protestant church when I was 22. I think one thing we need to know about Catholicism in Muslim countries in the Middle East is that it's very anti-Catholic, because they talk about the Crusades, and like all the bad guys in all Turkish movies are these Catholic soldiers wearing like a cross on their tabards. So I was very, very anti-Catholic, and all the Protestants that were around me were anti-Catholic as well. And a friend of mine who was a Protestant, he became a Catholic, and I felt very betrayed. And I set out to prove him wrong, that the Catholics corrupted the church teachings of the early church. But then I realized that actually in the Catholic Church we find the fulfillment of what Christ taught. And all my questions about scripture alone, or faith alone, or the question of magisterium were all found in the Catholic Church. So a few years later, here I was wrong again. One more time, I was confirmed into the Catholic Church. I had to wait for almost 2 years. So I decided to become a Catholic in Turkey. So I went to an RCIA type program there, but then I had to move to England for my studies, and then I went to England and went to another RCIA. So by the end of the 2 years, I had this yearning for the Eucharist, because I had come to believe and know that that was the real presence. And that was just this climax of this journey I have been on since I was a childhood. But also I found great comfort and solace in the sacrament of confession, which I was not looking forward to right before my confirmation. But I feel like I finally arrived home. That's how I felt, even though for years I was taught that this was this invention of Westerners and it was evil. But once I was confirmed, I finally that was the last stop for me, and I came home. to be honest, the Catholic life has been easier for me because in a way the church took away the burden of interpreting the Bible from me. There was thousands of years of prayer life and devotions and theology that I can rely on, and just adopt it into my own personal life as a wife and a mother. So slowly I realized that I can just that the Catholic Church was this deep ocean that I can go in and find riches after riches. And for instance, I thought I would never pray the Rosary, but it's one of my daily devotions now. That I have a mother in heaven has been great comfort. So I feel like the Catholic Church is so rich. There's something for everybody to cling on to and find hope.
I mean, her story is amazing. It really is. But you know, one thing I want to point out to our viewers is she lived in Turkey at the time, which actually, you would say she practiced Islam light, all right? I mean, compared to the other more radical, extreme Islam practices, Muslims who practice, and even when you hear about Christians being killed over in the Middle East, it's the more radical people who are practicing Islam who do that. I mean, she was fortunate, and I think she said to me, she said, I was blessed that, she goes, I don't know how I would have been able to convert if I lived in some of those other countries, but in Turkey, it was
like Iran or Saudi Arabia, perhaps.
Saudi Arabia or Iraq. And,
although I've been to Turkey before on pilgrimage, we've gone to Ephesus, which is phenomenal, and we've been to Istanbul as well. You can really see the strong presence of Islam there, obviously, and it's actually heartbreaking because Hagia Sophia used to be a center of Christianity, and it used to be Constantinople before it was Istanbul. And so there's this whole thing, you see this struggle going on between Christianity and Islam. So it is a predominantly Muslim country where she came from, even though you're right, it's not as strict as some of the others.
Well, that's what she said made it a little bit easy for her. The fact also she was educated, you know, she was going to college and on that path, so it was a little more education. She wasn't like at home, you know, some women who practice Islam are just like homebound and they raise children, they're not allowed.
Deprived from...
They're deprived, they're actually deprived. So she had said to me, well, Janet, it was a little bit easier for me because of the culture, my family culture that I was in. But of course, it was that journey to England where she first got the exposure, you know, of Christianity, and that opened the door for her.
You know what amazes me is that we, and Dr. Scott Hahn has said this for years, and he's a convert, famous, probably our most famous in the last 30 years convert to Catholicism, because he's done so much, and it's such a big part of this network here as well. We think about everything that these people go through to become Catholic. And we're cradle Catholics, and I'm speaking of myself and Janet. You and I we're not condemning anyone. We're thinking about what fools we were. We have the faith on a silver platter, and Dr. Scott Hahn always says that Catholics are sitting on Fort Knox and we don't even know it.
Right.
All these gifts, and we both always tell the story of how we're coming back, and Janet and I are reading these teachings and looking at the lives of the saints and understanding now, wow, these are saving us versus ruining us, which we used to think. Don't you feel like that old VA commercial? Where have I been all these years? I could have had a VA. And we don't take advantage of it. The majority of us. Thinking when I use the pronoun we, as I say in my book Beyond Sunday, that was me. I mean, I had a good Catholic education. I had good sisters back then. I had good lay teachers. But when I graduated from 8th grade, it was it was an emptiness. There was nothing there except to go to Mass on Sundays.
Well, and I went to Catholic school, grammar school, high school, and college. And it reminds me of one priest one time said to me, well, if you want to lose your faith, go to Catholic school. If you want to defend your faith, go to public school.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
But when you think about it, it's like you said, I had all those opportunities, but the culture, I just got swept in.
Me too. I got sucked right in.
Sucked right in. It all sounded so good. And suddenly, the things the nuns and the brothers and the priests had taught me in the school, I started saying, this doesn't make sense. What, are they crazy? No, I'm just going to, you know, especially the Pope. I used to always say, I don't believe in the infallibility of the Pope. I can remember that. The first time I sat in front of Father Pavone and went for my first session of spiritual direction, I said that. And he didn't fall off his chair. He didn't come choke me. I said, well, maybe I have a chance with this guy. I'll tell him what else I don't believe in and see where we're going.
Another thing.
Here's my laundry list.
But you're right, Teresa. Like, those wasted years. And I think when people say to me, well, Janet, you know, I'm 66 years old now, right? And people say, well, when are you going to retire? I said, retire?
Who's gonna
I'm
retire?
retiring when the Lord calls me home, I
Right.
guess, or I'll be here in our walkers one day, Teresa, you and me
Yeah,
going along.
Elena will be carrying us in. Here we are.
Oh, come on, hold my hand.
You know, it's like, once you fully embrace the church once again, like we did, it's like there's no turning back. But like you said, for people who didn't have that, we were like spoiled brats.
Yeah.
Spoiled brats, because we thumbed our nose at it. And here, these people, she was in that whole world of Islam, and she made this whole journey. Boy, oh boy, you know, that to me is astonishing.
Yeah, beautiful story. And her book is great. And she was on my show as well and promoting right after the book came out. And it's an amazing story. And she's just such a sweet, isn't she a sweet lady? I mean, just a sweetheart. Yeah.
And again, I'll give another shameless plug here. From Islam to Christ, one woman's path through the riddles of God. Derya Little, available at the EWTN Religious
We have to take a
Catalog.
break. When we come back, Elena, I know there's some really great points and tips that you want to share with us in terms of how to really embrace your faith and really learn it. And that was the key for us in coming back, really studying it. Go figure, actually reading what the church has to say as opposed to assuming the church says something.
Right.
I'm Teresa Tomeo along with Elena Rodriguez and Janet Morana. And don't touch that dial or that remote, as we say in radio and TV land. We'll be right back. So glad you're joining us for this episode of The Catholic View for Women, where we look at news and views from a truly Catholic perspective here on EWTN. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with my beautiful co-hosts, Elena Rodriguez and Janet Morana. And what a story, From Islam to Christ, One Woman's Journey. There is a book available. Janet will remind us of that in our homework. But I want to turn over to Elena, because you've got some great ideas in terms of really embracing your faith and also spreading your faith.
And these are ideas that help you like exercise your faith, because one thing is to
Just
learn
like we go to the gym to work out, we got to do the same thing in our faith.
The
faith
gym,
gym, right?
There you go.
The spiritual
So
gym.
Put on
Spiritual
your faith gym outfit. Look
Your workout,
cute,
yep.
Work out and get those tennis shoes going. One of the
Yep.
ways that you can do that is by going to EWTN.com/faith.
Okay.
Our faith tab on our EWTN.com website has great resources. I remember even in my late teenage years using some of that material. This is how long
You were way ahead of the game where we were, let me tell you.
Well, it was back then when the EWTN.com website first went online.
She's the young one of the bunch, if you haven't guessed that by now.
This website started winning all these awards, religious website awards, because it was so complete. It offers so many resources.
Yeah, it's great.
And there's, of course, you can watch EWTN television and radio there live. You can go to our archives. But the faith tab is that little tab. It's on the upper right-hand corner. And on that faith tab, you click there, you can ask questions about the faith. So it's like you have your own theologian on tap.
Oh, yeah,
there.
absolutely.
It is a
Yeah.
wonderful resource. Or you have our EWTN theology department there answering the questions, and you can also read what other people have asked, and perhaps your question is answered in that. But if you have a specific question, you can ask it, and it will be a few days later, it will be answered. There's also a library of all the church documents there that you can go and access entirely for free, and you can download them in your computer, or perhaps you want to print them out if you're a little bit old-fashioned like I am. I like to have paper in my hands and read and study those documents on your own time.
And you know what? It's not all that difficult, because we used to think, oh, I could never read a church document. We don't have theology degrees. Mm-hmm. You have degrees in education. I have degrees. We have degrees in journalism.
Correct.
You can take these documents and just ask the Lord to open your heart and open your mind. And for example, we not too long ago celebrated the 50th anniversary of the famous encyclical Humanae Vitae of human life. And I remember several people writing me, and we were covering a lot on my show last year, and a lot of people writing me and saying, well, you know, give me a shorter summary. I said, no, you don't need it. It's not that long, first of all, and really is very understandable. And a lot of them are. We just think, oh, somebody in the church wrote it, so we're automatically not going to understand it.
And here's another way that you can exercise your faith as well: reading, learning about it, and putting it in practice. What is an example of that? On your social media page, put out a quote that really stood out when you read a document from the church, when you learned something about your faith? Hey, I just learned that Catholics don't worship images, and that to me was striking. Put a quote there or a little thought. Put it on social media and let people begin a conversation.
Well, let them respond to it. Really,
yeah.
And you might have backslash. Be prepared for this. The life of faith is not an easy life, but that gives you the opportunity to prepare better and to talk and to share
and to
your
be able
faith.
to defend your faith.
And defend it in a loving way, but with arguments. And it's always possible that somebody is going to ask a question and you're going to go like, you know, I don't know how to quite answer that. It's perfectly okay to say, give me a few days. Let me find out for you. I'll get back to you. Don't make up something, because you may
People think they have to have the answer right away. They don't.
Right.
You're not supposed to be a walking encyclopedia. You're supposed to be a showcase of faith.
Another resource too, people I don't think realize, is every diocese in our country now has its own website. And in a lot, I know the Archdiocese of Detroit
is phenomenal.
Has phenomenal information up there. First of all, letters that your bishop has written are all posted on that website. Have you ever gone there? First of all, start with this question. Have I ever even checked out my own diocesan website? Have I looked at some of the things my bishop has written? Statements that have come out. Look at all the different ministries that are here in my diocese. Maybe I'm not even aware of that. And then now many parishes have their own websites too. So we're in this age where information is so easily obtained. And if you're not sure, guess what? Google it. You can Google a question and things will start popping up, and you can begin doing research and getting answers to all your questions.
Yeah, I also think too it's important that we're highlighting good websites like ours and our diocesan websites, because a lot of people, and I get this question, and I know you probably do too, and Janet, because we're out there on the road all the time representing the network, where people are wondering where do they go to get good information, right? Because of all the fake news out there. Well, that's why we work so hard on shows like this, on our radio programs, on my show, Catholic Connection, where I do the news every day, or on EWTN News Nightly, or with the National Catholic Register. We have all these resources for you. And every day you can watch us, you can listen to Catholic radio, you can go to one of our great resources, and they're so well done. They're professional people like us, Elena, who have journalism background, who are now doing these things. And I also want to talk about this understanding of these different major religions. Whenever you go to the Holy Land, and I know, Janet, you came with me to the Holy Land, you can feel the tension between the three major religions.
Absolutely.
You've got Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, in particular Catholicism in Jerusalem,
and
because
I mean,
of
the
what
tension
is
is thick.
You can feel it.
You can feel it. You could cut it with a knife.
And we have to remember that the Church reminds us that there are bits of truth in all major religions, and that all truth comes from God. There was a beautiful document, speaking of documents, that came out in the year 2000 called Dominus Jesus. We should put this on our homework on our website. And it talked about how the Church has a fullness of truth, but how other religions do have some messages of truth. And what we can do in order to help witness to people is to meet them where they're at. For example, in the Quran, they speak very highly of Mary, of the Blessed Mother. And Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad, is many believe going to be huge in terms of that name and the connection to Our Lady in converting many Muslim people eventually over to Catholicism.
Well, you know, Father Frank worked, Father Pafone, in the Vatican back in the 90s, the late 90s, and of course he had a lot of contact with St. John Paul II. And I'm going to read here just Father Frank described one time he was at a meeting with St. John Paul II, and there was a discussion arose in what would be the greatest danger in the Church in decades to come. And so he said, John Paul looked very solemn, very serious. He raised his finger and he said, in a very deep, solemn voice, Islam. So imagine, back in like the 90s, St. John Paul II said, Islam is going to be a danger to the Catholic Church. And so I think, you know, reflecting on Derya's story and seeing what we can do to spread our faith is really so important.
Right.
And now it's
homework.
teacher time, homework. Of course, number one is read this beautiful book that we said, From Islam to Christ by Derya Little, available at the EWTN Religious Catalog, which is EWTNRC.com. Learn more about your faith, like wonderful Elena said, go to EWTN.com/faith. So many resources. And like Elena suggested, posting an interesting fact that catches your eye on your social media, spread it out there. Pray for all Christians under persecution. And then finally, go to the CatholicViewForWomen.com, our website, for more information. And finally, like the Catholic View for Women on Facebook. And of course, let's not forget
Our Lady,
our kitchen,
Madonna of the Kitchen.
Madonna of the Kitchen, available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. Beautiful symbolism, the pot here to nourish your body and soul, the broom to keep your house clean and your thoughts clean, and the keys to the kingdom and also keeping your home safe. The Kitchen Madonna, available at the EWTN.
And I
Religious
really am
Catalog.
glad that we are reminding folks to pray for Christians under persecution. I think we need to look at what's going on with persecution around
right.
the world, but also in this country. We are suffering, and have been for a long time, a white martyrdom, where we are being persecuted for our beliefs, for example, through the courts and through opposition out there in the streets and whatnot. And now we're, in some ways, we're physically getting attacked, right?
That's right.
But there are Christians in this last century that have literally lost their lives or been injured or lost their homes because of their faith. Remember that, and remember the beauty that we have in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church and how blessed we are in this country. Thanks for watching The Catholic View for Women. On behalf of my co-hosts, Janet Morana and Elena Rodriguez, I'm Teresa Tomeo, and we'll see you next time on The Catholic View.